to sit with us to go through this and look, as per the title there, we're going to be touching on how we can improve service delivery utilizing the likes of Microsoft AI tools, which is going to be the theme of what we go through today. Just to introduce us, I'm Gary McEachran, Business Development Manager for CE at HSO, so I handle speaking to people like yourselves and taking you through the correct bits and pieces to satisfy requirements around CE. We've got Sam.
Afternoon, everyone.
Herman, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Herman Sadie. I'm a CE government lead. Been working within local government now for about 15 years, implementing solutions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Andy Venter, Head of Public Sector at HSO. I've been with HSO about 2 years, before that ex-Microsoft. Really good to see you guys today, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Gary, back to you.
Perfect. So that's who we are, which is always a good start. However, what are we going to go through today? We're going to start with introductions, obviously, and we're going to really talk to you a little bit about who we are as HSO and what the solution is. We're then going to move on to what the government accelerator is, which is one of the key things we've been working on over the last year, looking at then managing service requests, and then onto an AI virtual agent solution demonstration. Finalising with really a call to action where we can have a bit of a Q&A and really talk through, you know, how actually easy it is to do some of these things that we're talking to you about today. Okay, we can also do any follow-ups from there as well. However, the first things first, you know, who are HSO? It's always good to cover that off. So we are a global leading Microsoft provider. We operate across the globe. However, we operate very much locally as well. So you are talking to HSO UK at the moment. We always like to do that because particularly when we operate in the likes of public sector, you know, it is obviously regionalised for that case. So making sure we have the correct focus is really important to us. We've got over 30 years of experience operating in this sector. When we say this sector, we mean, yes, public sector, but we also mean across really what we do from a technology standpoint. And everything we do is all about Microsoft. You know, everything is Microsoft. Everything we've done is Microsoft, and it's all been focused around that, and it always will be Microsoft from our point of view. And what that's led us to be is an Azure Gold partner, which is great. However, we're also in the inner circle. And what that is effectively that we're in the upper echelon of Microsoft partners. We get loads of things from them, loads of support, and get to do a lot of things alongside Microsoft, which effectively relays into our customers as well. Okay. Over the years, we've grown significantly, as you can imagine. However, we've really completed around about 2,500 projects across the globe, and all of them have been focused on outcomes, you know, providing lots of value to our customers. How can we give you guys the best value of these solutions by deploying them in the best way for you guys? And the way we do that is really centered around how we sort of focus our ethos. Everything we do is circled around people, you know, obviously our customers being people is a massive focus. We've also got the likes of charitable work that we focus on, where we support charities like Kids Out, British Heart Foundation, and so on around other bits and pieces. But also our employees being people. So there's a big focus from our point of view around how we support our employees in, you know, everyday life and how they move through the business and achieve new things and learn new things, because then effectively, you know, a happy, motivated workforce give our customers real benefits as well, because it means that everything is improving massive value to yourselves. Okay, so that's a bit around us. However, obviously doing everything we've done over the last 30 years has driven us to be successful, which is great. So on the left hand side we have the areas that we're working, which is everything Microsoft. However, on the right hand side we've got some of the things that we've won over the years, and most recently winning Global Partner of the Year, which is obviously massive for us to win. But on the left hand side, as I said, there's everything that we work in terms of business applications, security, data and AI, you know, all of the stuff that you'd expect from a global partner like us. And finally, in terms of how we structure ourselves, because it's all well and good us being this company that is successful, having success, but we need to structure ourselves correctly as well. And the way we structure ourselves is effectively from a sector base at the top in the columns, by splitting things out, making sure we have the correct focus on specific sectors, and then also overlaying a lattice of how we will support from a product or a service line perspective. So we've got UI for the likes of finance and ERP really. However, the next one being CE, which is one of the core focuses for today, obviously, where we're looking at customer service, which is all about, I'm stealing some thunder of Herman here, but it's all about how we're looking at that government accelerator piece. Also the likes of BI, modern workplace, transformation, and application management and support, with some shared services on the right hand side that helps us shape with the engagement with our customers, the likes of enterprise architects, project services, technical services, and so on, effectively driving how everything is shaped for all our customers. And some of the customers that we have worked, similar to some of you guys on this call, are right there. You know, we've done lots of work with lots of people across lots of different things, but focusing on more the public sector is a snapshot of who we work with here. Okay. So tailing back from that, so what do? We deal with Microsoft, and what this is the Microsoft ecosystem. So everything here is really kind of everything that we do. If we look in the middle, we've got all of the first party applications, which are great because it gives us effectively specialist solutions to do specific tools. The thing is, though, you don't obviously need to have all of these. You can switch things on, you can switch things off. And the big focus that we're going to be talking about today is customer service in the top there. The big thing with this, though, is it's overlaid on a modern workplace, utilizing data and AI, which is going to be a big focus today, and everything really being part of the cloud now as it can be deployed. So we're leveraging these third-party apps with everything on the left and the right-hand side, and we're leveraging with the Power Platform, which there's a couple of bits and pieces we're going to talk to you about on that today, and that includes the likes of Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, some of the things that hopefully some of you will have heard of. We'll talk a bit about that later. And then on the right-hand side, some of the other Microsoft App Source applications, which are all the collaborative tools that we would expect lots of people to have heard of, particularly after the likes of COVID, with Teams being a massive supporting thing throughout that, and what we're using at the moment, Office 365, DocuSign, and LinkedIn. So it's how can we leverage certain things with other things to give you guys the benefit of what you needed to do. And that's what we work with our customers on. Okay. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Herman now. He's going to dive into really bringing that previous slide together into what the Government Accelerator is.
Thanks, Gary. So we wanted just to do a bit of a introduction to the Local Government Accelerator. So I'll go quickly through the theory and then we'll show you what does it look like. So in terms of a structure, similar to the previous slide, everything starts on Azure. So the whole platform is built from Azure. You then have just above that the Power Platform. So we use a lot of Dataverse, Power Automate, Power Apps, Power BI. So all building up to using the first-party Dynamics 365 customer services first-party application. So that allows us to create cases and manage those cases through the process. On top of that, so this is where we've built the HSO version, which is, we know that Dynamics out of the box is commercially focused. So it's just taking out some of those commercial elements and make it more public sector focused. So this baseline, once you've got that, we then have a number of modules and you can decide where do you start, which one do you start with. There's no link between them. As long as you've got the base, you can then start with any of those modules. And as always, not everyone's exactly the same. So as a customer, you can then have your customer specific layer where we install the accelerator, but then make it fit exactly for you. And all around this, so part of what we're talking about today, all of this is supported through AI and Copilot, helping you work smarter, getting people to do more with less as well. Just to talk through a bit of how is this all structured. So everything starts with a customer. So from a Dynamics perspective, that's either an account, which is a business, or a contact, which is a person. From there on, each customer can have alerts and caution lists. So when we do any services, we need to know if there's anything we need to know about that customer or account in terms of alerts or cautions. We also track properties. So addresses is really important for service delivery. So we need to know who moves in, who moves out. And we also use cross-references because within local government, we do lots of integrations. So bringing together all those different identities for me in all my back office systems into one place so we can show one view of me. And then the important bit is creating cases. So from a case, we need to know what service it is. So today we're going to look at information governance service. And each service then has service types. So within information governance, we've got FOIs, subject access requests, data breaches. So that defines what our case is going to be.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Just a question. Hả? Hả? Cam có đây chú. Cam.
Sorry.
Sorry, Herman, go on.
So we create these detail entities. So once you create a case, because we know in local government we have to create hundreds of different service types, and they're all so different, we use this polymorphic relationships. So from a technical perspective, that means I can create one case and I can have one of a lot of disjointed entities that brings together my module. So from one case, I can then say what type of case I'm creating. And that's how we build those up, make it really simple to configure. From a baseline, so we do account and contact management, sensitive data, all of these things we will show you within the demo. One important thing is service level objectives. That's one thing you might not have seen before. So out of the box, Microsoft gives us service level agreements. There is a limitation to that, though. You can only have active SLAs against 7 entities, and we know we're going to have hundreds. So we have developed our own service level objectives, very similar to SLAs, just a lot simpler and only working day based, which, yeah, we still have a lot of the same features as SLAs. And the things we're going to show you today, we can only, a short time, only show you one, but yeah, freedom of information and EIRs. We've got subject access requests, looking at the 9 different services within rights request, data breach. We've also created a Canvas app that you can use as a starter because data breach is internal. If I create a breach, I go to the Canvas app on my phone, fill in everything, and that then kicks off the process. Similarly, ad hoc information requests, that's when DWP or CPS or the police come ask you for information. And then we've got feedback for comments, compliments, suggestions with, again, a starter portal form you can use. And complaints, so there's 3 different processes because health and social care is different to children's and different to all your other complaints as well. So we take into account all of those. From a licensing perspective, one of the main aims for us with the platform is to make sure you use as much as you can from your investment in the licenses. So how do we optimize that? We do use cases, and that is limited to only the people who create and close those cases. Everyone else who's working in the field or gets a question from an FOI, you only need a limited license. So we've created 2 personas just to simplify it. If I'm in the contact center, I'm creating cases, so I need a customer service license. But then if I'm just answering FOI questions, I might only get 2 or 3 a year, so I'm not a full-time user. I only need a Power App per app license, which is significantly cheaper when you have to have a lot of people on that. So again, we try and just use as much as we can from the licenses you already have. And for extras, we try and use the lowest cost we can as well. So hopefully all that makes sense. So let's show you what that looks like. So if I swap over to iDynamics, so we've created an app for information management, and in the left-hand side you can see, so we've got a couple of dashboards just to show at a high level what type of services we have and volumes, and from here you can then drill down into other attributes, and if you want to break it down by owner, that you can then break it down and keep drilling into your data. So it's a really quick way of getting a snapshot of where things are coming from and where the bottlenecks are. On the left, you can then also see we've got some of our master data, accounts and contacts. So if we look at a contact, This is where we stripped down some of it, made it public sector focused. So our relationships specifically looks at, am I an MP, councillor, resident, non-resident, because they are different personas that need different things. You'll then see we've got all your personal details, your contact details, but then there's also sensitive data. So this is protected because not everyone in the council should be able to see that. And over time, we will learn more about a person and we will fill in more of these fields as we go along. There's also helpful tips for people who's new to say, what does sensory impairment really mean? So over time, we will build up this record and keep it up to date. In the middle, we've got a little alert that says, Adam's just returned from hospital, so don't try and phone his mobile, talk to his carer. How do we know who his carer is? Again, we create relationships between contacts and other contacts. So on the right-hand side, we can see our connections. And we can see Ellen is Adam's spouse or partner, but then there's also Sally, who's his carer. So again, that's our link back into how do we contact him or the carer. On the right, we've also got a couple of quick views to see all of Adam's open cases from the last 6 months, all his closed cases. If we've had any documents uploaded, so care plans or anything, they will all be in here. We see all the connections. Then if we had any integrations, we can see all the cross references as well. From a details, again, all the commercial things are gone. We now just focus on what contact preferences we have and what can we send out to Adam. So this is accounts and contacts. They're very similar. Cases. Before we start with a case, just to quickly show you how we configure our services. So looking at information governance, we can then see we've got our 6 processes, and for each of these processes, it's all configuration driven. So we define what the process is called. We've got SLOs, so I've got 5 days to send a response back to the requester, 20 days to resolve it. And when do my SLAs start? It's either the next day or the day we received it. And then the final bit, this is where all the magic happens. When we create a case, it knows to create this entity, which is our FOI EIR entity. As soon as we create a case, it then comes to look, what entity do I need to create and what form do I show? So that's that relationship we saw in the ERD. That's where the clever bits happen. So if we just look at cases, when we create a case, the first thing we need to do is select the service, information governance, and then we select one of the services inside information governance, and then who's reporting it. By default, it's saying Adam's reporting this as himself. He's also allowed to do it on behalf of someone else. And if that service allowed anonymous, it's also possible to have anonymous requests for things like feedback. You can do that anonymously. And then how did this come in? So again, once you submit this, it will then create the case. So just to show you what one will look like, I've got a case for Adam here. In the middle, we always have a little summary. So if I just want to have a snapshot of what's happened, what the important dates are, I can see this here, and I can see this FOI has got some questions on it. So when we look at the details, we've got our business process flows. So the first thing we need to do is identify this FOI. We can look at, is it a FOI or a EIR? Did we receive it in writing? Because that is a requirement before we can move on. So the team will look at all this and make sure it is a valid FOI. We then move on to our research. So we can do searches on previous questions. Is it something that's in public already? So we can refer them to that. So We then break down our questions. So this is quite important because over time, we can go search those questions and we build up this whole database of questions and answers that we can then refer to. Each question is assigned to a specific department and a response owner. So when I create a new question, I will get a little notification to say a new question has been assigned to me. It links me to the record. And all I then need to do is to come say, well, I'm now in progress or I've completed it. I also need to inform the team, how long do we think it's going to take? Because we don't want to, we don't need to do it if it's over the 18 hours. So this is where all the questions and answers gets filled in. And what we can then do as well is once we've got our answers, we can then also generate a document. So we've got all the details in here. All we need to do in the FOI record is to say, go use one of my Word templates and generate me a document. And that will then bring up my record. It fills in all the data from the record. And in the bottom, we have all our questions and answers. So a lot of this at the moment, people are doing very manually. So yeah, having all the automation makes a big difference to how they do that. So that is a quick whistle-stop tour of the FOI records. Again, happy if you wanted more details on any of the other processes. They're all very similar. We try to keep things the same so that when you look at one process, it's all, on the left-hand side, you've got cases and then a summary and all your timeline. So yeah, we try and keep them all the same. So for now, I think that's our demo. So if there's no questions, or if you want to keep questions to the end, we can.
I think, yeah, Herman, I think just on the back of that, if we pause just for a second, because I can see there's at least one question in the chat, and just for those still on the call, the next section will be focusing on generative AI with Sam. But before we move on to that one, do you want to answer the question in the chat? So you mentioned linking people, properties together. How is this achieved? Michael, I don't know if you want to ask Herman direct.
Yeah,
thanks, Andy. Chris, so really just is that sort of a master data management process that you've implemented?
Yes, so we will use LLPG and LPG data and use UPRNs to say what property we're talking about. But off the back of that, we then create a property record, and that will say who moved in when, who moved out when, to keep that history of that property. So in public sector, a property is as important as a contact or an account. So that's how we do that. We're also looking at, we ideally do not want to integrate with every gazetteer product out there. So we have clever ways of how we interact with OS to get UPRNs and things. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, that's very useful. Thanks, Herman.
Fantastic. Thank you, Herman. Any other questions on the accelerator before we move on to the AI session? If you go to the next slide for me, Herman, I think you're still presenting, right?
Yep.
And then the next one after that one. Just a single slide. Won't take very much time on this one. We'll try and leave it for Sam because I think that's the fancy stuff that's coming up next. What I wanted to bring to life here is two things. One is, we focused around some of those internal processes. We've focused around how you make it easier to capture information. We focused around how do you make it easier for citizens to engage. How do you use that information effectively to make your processes easier? Obviously, as Herman said at the start of that slide, all of that stuff you can wrap Copilot and AI around that as well. So really important. But the reason why we wanted to show you guys that at the beginning is because if you want to start leveraging some of those new technologies going forward, having access to the right data, super important, right? So we wanted to make that point. And the next phase, obviously, is then saying, how do we leverage some of that data very effectively? So what hopefully Sam will show you guys, and Sam, I'll be rubbish at trying to explain it in detail, so I'll leave that to you. But really, it's about internal processes and using some of that data effectively using tools like generative AI as well. So like I said, so really the focus on the sessions around those 2 use cases. Sam, over to you to bring that last part to life.
Thanks so much, Andy. Yeah, Herman, do you mind just I'm going to be the awful next slide, please, person. And we can go through to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, just a sort of brief introduction really to myself and what we're looking to cover in this this bit of time we have together. So I think it's fair to say from sort of February of this year, has there really ever been a bigger change and transformation in terms of how people are working? And I think most organizations that I speak to, it's a sort of question of, are you going to admit that you're using ChatGPT in your everyday work or not? And I wouldn't mind actually just starting off before we launch into this solution, just asking you all, if you are currently using ChatGPT in your day-to-day work, please raise your hand and we'll just have get an idea of how many of you are currently using it. 4 people have admitted so far. 5. Okay. It's a safe space. Anyone can come forward. Excellent. We can see Aline saying that we use Bing Chat. So I think it's kind of fair to say, obviously, we have people across all of our organizations who are already using generative AI, and they're using it to see and obviously things like Bing Chat are being used in a sort of to ensure that sort of data isn't being leaked onto OpenAI. But I think immediately, as soon as these solutions started coming out, we started asking questions of, okay, but what about my data? What can I do with my data, my internal data? And the questions around knowledge management, I think they kind of go across any organization, doesn't matter what sector, what vertical you're in. It is a challenge for everyone to organize their organizational knowledge graph, whether you've got those in SharePoint lists, whether you've got those in unstructured PDFs, all of those kind of things. It's a big problem. And for most people, when they land into an organization on their first day, trying to give them some way to interact with the sort of behemoth of legacy data that sits there is a challenge. And one of the things that we've been working on across a couple of clients, but specifically the one I wanted to talk to you about today was with a council that we're currently engaged with, where they basically they've got an internal power virtual agent and one that they use for externally as well. But in terms of managing the topics, it's an onerous task, and it's taking up a huge amount of resource from their IT team to be able to maintain all of these various different knowledge sources. And that's really where we got asked to come in and sort of think about what we could use within the generative AI workspace to be able to, well, basically provide more in-depth reasoning and sources, because I'm sure if any of you have used kind of traditional chatbots, there's this kind of if this, then this. And it's very, very difficult for us as humans to come up with every single possible, way that sort of plan out a user journey or conversation. But of course, now with everyone sort of using interfaces like ChatGPT, our expectations from a customer service perspective now are kind of going from here, where we're just desperately trying to speak to a human when we're maybe changing our bank account details, to now where we expect to be able to have these natural language conversations. And hopefully, again, it means that we can save a lot of time in doing so. So what we did for this council, what we've kind of like offer as a sort of as an offering, is around being able to say, right, so let's say you've got, in this instance, they had over 1,500 documents, so lots of unstructured data in various sort of Word documents, PowerPoint, all of your kind of usual Office Suite documents. And yeah, basically it was very, very difficult for anyone to join that organization and try to kind of access that information. So basically what we did is use a technique that's called retrieval augmented generation, which I know rolls off the tongue wonderfully, but what that in essence is instead of previously where we would think about training a large language model like ChatGPT on our data, what we, as a sort of a common pattern now, is that what we do is, before we start using our large language model, is that we go off and we retrieve what we think to be the relevant information to that given query. And so that then basically we can ground the large language models like ChatGPT, or what we'll show you later, which is built in Azure, in the data that we want it to be grounded. So we get all of this kind of wonderful generative AI goodness, but it's combined with our own data sources and things that we want the user to be asking questions about. So we went through all this and we've demonstrated it to their C-suite and looking at sort of rolling this out as a solution for them. So as I say, this isn't just a kind of art of the possible session. This is a real live solution that we have customers using presently. So Herman, can I be that annoying person and ask next slide again, please? Thank you ever so much. You might just need to click over a few more times just for all those images to load up. Oh, just back one. That's perfect. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to, before we go into the demo, I just wanted to sort of just try and give you a bit of a visualization as to kind of what's happening. So if we take this sort of from right to left, so on that far right-hand side, that's representing those 1,500 basically kind of unstructured data. So it's 1,500 documents which have policies to do with onboarding, leave policy requests, how do I change bank accounts, all of these kind of things that me as an internal person starting with an organization might want to know. And what we in essence do, we kind of take all that information and then we chunk it up and we get it into these little bite-sized chunks and put that into an index. So in our instance, we use Azure Cognitive Search, but there are other indexes that people will use. But it's a very, very important step, because once we have everything kind of in this index, and as I say, we can index thousands of documents in a couple of minutes, and then we've got it into something that we can use in our application. So if we now take it back to the council employee, so let's say they've got a policy query. So something that I'm going to show you in a second is some questions when you're starting in a new position. What do I need to do when I'm onboarding? So how this would work is that they would input that into the chat UI or into the chatbot that we'll show you. And then the first thing that this does is it basically takes your query and then it decides, right, I need to search for the following things in my internal index. So let's say, please tell me all the things I need to do today on my first day. And it will take that and using natural language kind of say, right, I need to search for onboarding activities first day. And through a lot of clever indexing, a lot of clever sort of ways that we bring back that information, we then send that sort of extract that we found and then use Azure OpenAI to be able to then kind of use that with your query and the knowledge that we've extracted, so that then we're grounding it within the organizational data. So as I say, what this means, it kind of, I think saying it democratizes AI might be a little bit too far, but what it does do is sort of in previous patterns, an organization would need to go through the training process for one of these large language models themselves and to be able to get it to be, to talk about their data. And typically, I think it costs something like $15 million to train ChatGPT. And of course, organizational data, it changes. We don't basically want to be retraining a model every single time that something changes with our leave policy, for example, or that we get a new piece of software for seeing our payslips, right? So again, what this does is it gets you sort of 80 to 90% of the way there in terms of a really, really awesome generative AI solution, but as I say, not with the same costs that are attached to it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take you through a brief demo of our solution. So let me just start. And what I like to do is just kind of start off with what a normal ChatGPT request would look like, because I just want to sort of show you that this hallucination is probably sort of a term that many of you on this call would have heard of, and where we liken sort of these large language models. They're almost like an overconfident teenage boy in terms of the knowledge that they have access to. But if they get something wrong, they're really confident, and they're also very eloquent with what they're saying. So therefore, it's very believable, the responses that we'll get. So let's just sort of, for an example, right, in terms of sending something off to ChatGPT, if I asked it something like, what is the meaning of life. So we get a sort of like a wonderful, coherent, eloquent answer, absolutely fantastic, right? However, when we're sort of interacting, let's say, with our citizen customers or within our internal customers, we obviously want to have some control in terms of what the output is going to be. So if I just switch windows, just 1 second, just give me. So let me just bring over our solution, which is called Cassandra. And let me ask Cassandra the same question. So what is the meaning of life? And you see what happens is immediately we kind of get back some focus and we get kind of like an idea of what this solution is to do with. So we say, I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question as it's beyond my answer, subjective to philosophical questions. Is there anything else going to help you with related to HR and recruitment matters? And in this instance, yes. So to give you a little bit of background on the kind of data that we've added to this index. So we've basically taken for this demo about sort of like 200 PDFs sort of freely available from a university online. And we're going to use those as some examples of what we're going to do. So in terms of persona, I am a lecturer in the physics department, and I've got a new lecturer that's coming to join my team. Now, what I want to do is kind of find out what they need to do on their first day. And typically, this would have meant trawling through loads of documents. It would have been quite a lot of time. So if I send this off, I'm going to say, I have a new starter on my team. Please take me through the onboarding tasks they will need to perform. So quite a simple request, but let's see what we get back. So as you can see, we immediately go, the new starter will need to perform several onboarding tasks related to complete the pre-onboarding stage, complete the new starter declaration, complete any final document checks that may be necessary. And what we also get additionally in terms of all of these things that I might need to be aware of is actually a reference to the document that we got this information from. So for example, you can see this is an example excerpt of where this information has been brought back from. So again, it's kind of what we're trying to do is instead of say what I showed you example before with ChatGPT, and you kind of are going, where is it getting its information from? Could be anything from the open internet. What we're trying to do here is show you the kind of provenance of the response, so that, you know, naturally, as with large language models, they are not wholly predictable, right? So their responses, we can sort of narrow their scope. However, what we can't do is basically get them to a point where we know word for word what that is going to be. So you can see we've already got some, you know, some fairly decent knowledge retrieval, and sort of some examples of what's going to be coming back. Let's ask it another question. So we'll just kind of keep this conversation going. So let's say, thanks. They've asked me when they're likely to get paid for their first month. Send that off. Yeah, so immediately again, if they do not convert to an employee by the time the payroll is run, they will not be paid for that month. The payroll run is usually run a day or two after the payroll cutoff for each month. So we're getting a little bit of reasoning now. So if the new starter's date is before the payroll cutoff date of the current month, they should receive their first paycheck at the end of the month, if etc. etc. So we're already getting that. And also what you can see is that we get a lot of different sort of like follow-up questions as well. So we'll say, what should the new starter do if they believe they have not been paid correctly? I can immediately send this off as well. And we can sort of start giving them an idea of, again, linking it back to all of these policies. So again, we've got this citation that supports that the line manager will then investigate the issue and escalate it to HR operations. We're getting that provenance that comes back as well. Further to that as well, we can sort of say, asking, for example, how they can access their pay slips. And what this is doing as well as we're kind of carrying on this conversation is that we're sort of building this context as we go through. So again, we've got some nice knowledge retrieval that's telling me sort of they can access their pay slips through the people and money system. which is obviously a system that's particular to the university, and giving them that kind of information as well. The other thing as well that we can do with this is that in terms of, especially from a time-saving perspective, is we can take this from just being a great, I understand, Sam, we can retrieve from a knowledge base. That's very helpful. But naturally, what this is also very good for is kind of just saving us time, right? So let's ask, for example, as an example prompt here, great, thanks. Could you draft a friendly welcome email to the starter? She is called Diana Damro, that will be joining our physics department as a guest lecturer. Please provide her with a high-level overview of her onboarding tasks and when she will likely receive her first paycheck and access her payslips. So we'll send this off. There we go. And we get a nice formatted email. And as I say, there's all sorts of things that we can do in the background in terms of making this more aligned to your organizational tone of voice, for example. So that's, just another example of some of the ways that we can tweak this. And then also just some nice little added extras on the end. We can say Diana's first language is German. There we go. Get it in German, or actually it's French. There we go. We get a nice. So it has all of these kind of in terms of a slightly pithy sort of exit in terms of showing you some of the things that large language models can obviously do. But as I say, hopefully gives you some ideas in terms of I think, as I say, I haven't met a single organization where knowledge management and access to all of your internal documents isn't a challenge. And as I say, this is something that I think really helps address that challenge. And yeah, be more than happy to take any questions you might have.
So I think you were just showing off there with us with the different languages, right? Paul, I see you got a question in the chat. I think it's a great question. I was just about to start writing you a response, but I think if you want to raise that question directly to Sam, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's simply that if the certainly in the context of HR, there's certain language that they prefer to use. So would there be a library of templates that the AI would have access to for specific purposes?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. So around kind of personas and kind of who has access to what is a really important question. So what this has in the background in terms of the Azure Cognitive Index is that all of these PDFs are kind of like all the source material is segregated, and we kind of tag it, giving it the relevant, obviously, so whether it's sensitive or whether it's only for use with these kind of people. And then what we can do is hook this up to Microsoft Graph so that in essence, whoever is calling this service, they are only obviously getting access to the material that they should be. But as I said, with the index that we build up, it's very much kind of the old policy of kind of garbage in, garbage out. And kind of we obviously have to, the library of templates that are declared, and how we kind of, that part of it's really important.
And Sam, would it be fair to say that you could point this at, for example, in the case of HR, at the set of templates, but if you have a different query, you put that at a different data set, right? So the data set feeding into the specific requirement is relevant to the function you're performing, right?
Exactly. So in the background, what we've done, so the demo that I'm showing you today is kind of, it's relatively just focused on sort of like one corpus of documents. But what we also use is it's a library, which basically we can provide a set of tools to the large language model. And you can basically say, so how do you, so for example, for any HR related matters, I want you to look at this data set. For anything to do with IT support queries, I'd like you to look at this data set, or, there is kind of endless in terms of how you can put that together. But as I say, this is just looking at one corpus of documents. But as I say, we have sort of done things in the past with segregating across.
Awesome. Paul, does that answer your question before we go on to the next one? Awesome, thank you. Ed, you had a question as well around data usage and tracking of data as well. Do you wanna say that to Sam?
Yeah, hi Sam. I just wanted to ask around obviously the use of, I guess, the sort of more traditional way of searching for things, and obviously if we want to see how that compares to people using this and the shift from one to the other, what that would look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, in terms of the monitoring aspect, I think we can sort of see in here as well. So what we do is offer in the background, we often sort of marry this with using something like Cosmos DB to be able to track sessions and kind of gather feedback as well as we kind of go through this. So kind of quite simple, kind of like, you know, if they want to leave a comment or if it's kind of, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down, to kind of track the sessions. On top of that, what we do is integrate this whole process with Azure API management so that we can sort of track the prompts in and the responses that come back, so that there is like kind of a bit more fine-grained sort of levels of detail you can go to in terms of analysing the prompts and what's been going back and forth. And then, yeah, that's, as I say, hopefully that answers, at least from the analytics side, from being able to give you a view of kind of like, this is tracking well for these kind of topics, etc. It's mostly a kind of feedback loop that we would put into the application.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. And then Delia, great question from Delia as well, Sam. I don't know if you can see that in the chat.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was just going to come on to that. So in terms of this, I also should point out as well that I think probably a lot of people on this call as well will be getting demos from Microsoft for M365 Copilot. So there is kind of there are native Copilots out there as well. That should be something I should point out. So this solution, we do a bit more fine tuning in terms of being able to, especially with the system messages and how we get the AI model to behave, to make it more bespoke to your organization's tone of voice than can be done in that situation. We can absolutely just work with SharePoint intranet data. That's absolutely fine. There is some work we have to do in terms of kind of accessing your SharePoint data and making sure how, as I say, the access to that is governed properly. But yeah, it's absolutely something that we can do.
So thank you, Sam. Any other questions for Sam? No, I think you've done a good job there, Sam. So thank you for that. Obviously, lots of use cases for this as well, right? So, you know, I remember seeing a demo. I was on a demo with another customer a couple of weeks back where they were actually using this for external sources. So basically, the council applied or were looking to apply this to their external data sources. So anybody can go and ask a question, and basically what this would do is look at all the data that's external facing and then provide a response back based on that. So for example, you know, when is my next bin date? You know, how do I pay my council tax, etc. Now, there was a question in that particular session that came out that I thought was really interesting. And the customer raised the question in terms of, you know, for example, how do I pay my council tax? Obviously, the response comes back with, here's the council bank details. And the question back was, well, can somebody actually hijack the chatbot to give them the wrong bank details, so you're paying the wrong customer? Which I thought was a really good question. And the answer that came back was very simple. Well, the chatbot will only provide the information that's available on your website. So in that case, the challenge isn't the chatbot being hijacked. It means your council data is being affected, right? Would that be a good example, Sam?
Yeah, exactly. So this whole kind of pattern of kind of, is to say, basically taking sort of a user query and then going searching whatever database that is, whether it's internal, external. We've also built examples where, for example, if there's a particular website that you kind of get your external data from, we can go and kind of scrape that data and bring it all. There's all sorts of clever things you can do with it. But the ways and sort of the safeguards and policies that are around this are really important. So for example, we only use Azure OpenAI for these resources. And the big difference, again, and it was good to see that someone mentioned in the call earlier that they're using Bing Chat, is that anyone in your organization that copies and pastes into ChatGPT, that in terms of just being kind of free data for them to use in future models, that is the reality, right? So that is obviously, if you're at a point where you're onboarding Bing Chat Enterprise, I would heartily recommend that, purely as a way to basically kind of shepherd your users away from potentially copy and pasting presentations, copy and pasting, sensitive data into that. I would heartily implore you to be proactive and kind of get people using that. But there is also, I think, another point to say where sort of large language models, they're wonderful things, but they have huge limitations. And in essence, what all they are doing is, in a really, really clever way, is predicting what the next word in the should be. That is all that it is essentially doing, but with billions and billions of parameters. So we are still at this point where there needs to be sort of a focus to these co-pilots and these experiences. So that's why, in essence, we sort of do suggest sort of, having a kind of a set of prompts and a sort of set of sort of parameters for each business unit, and think about how your organizational co-pilot takes place. But as I say, I think it's sort of shifting sands in some ways in terms of how quickly the technology is moving. But we really do feel that this pattern with using Azure OpenAI as your sort of large language model sort of repository where you're going to use that information, it's, as I say, it's completely obviously Microsoft hosted. It's not going, that data isn't going anywhere near Azure, going to OpenAI. And you can put in all of your kind of things like private endpoints and kind of robust security that you would want to from that perspective. And then, as I say, at the moment, I think with retrieval augmentation, it's like how cleverly you can build your index, and we've found huge variances in terms of how useful these things are, depending on how well you construct that index. So, yeah, all of these things that we're enjoying doing, and yeah, all good fun.
Awesome, Sam. Can see the passion as you're talking. There's obviously something that's very close to your heart. Do you mind just flicking the slides up again? So I think there's a final slide just to close this out. Conscious of time, and I'm a big fan of giving folks a few minutes back if we can to go and make a cup of coffee before the next one. So those are some of your slides. Call to action. What we did today is we showcased you two use cases around obviously improving customer service experiences. One is both from an external point of view around how do you adopt new technologies, one in terms of how do you streamline operational processes, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that stuff, leveraging the Microsoft stack and being very clever with the licensing is the sort of one element of it. The other one is how do you actually apply, some of the latest technologies like generative AI, chatbots, et cetera, to this as well, right? So key thing to think about, there's only so much we can show you guys in the time that's available here. Sam, you may want to stop sharing because it's really flickering. And I don't know, Herman, same on your side as well, please. We can only show you so much in the time that we are today. If you have any sort of follow-up questions, if you want to go into a deeper dive session, both around the Accelerator or Cassandra as well, please drop us a note. I think Michael will put our contact details for us in the chat. Like I said, give us a shout. Let us know how we can support you guys, and we'll be happy to follow up.